all, again, I mean, those are in some cases attributes being set forth by people on the facility side that are, and sometimes just, they're not congruous with what IT people want.
Are there any point of view on that? Well, now this brings up an interesting point, because in the past, if you have now an IT person that you have to sell to and a facilities management person that you have to sell to, how does that sale happen? I mean, in our experience in enterprises was when you had to sell to the CFO and the marketing person and the ops person, boy, this was forever. This was not going to happen. And if we're in that situation here, again, does that become a barrier to adoption of these technologies? Jeff?
So I mean, I think this sort of is a subtle point, but it's actually very relevant in that and maybe just to explain, I mean, the facilities guy is the one who actually gets the credit for saving energy and the cost for the energy, and the data center guy is focused on uptime and not focused on necessarily the energy. And for the last several years, there has been this discontinuity in the fact that you've got two people that may or may not be reporting to the same person or have any kind of relationship has really slowed down the deployments, because really selling to the data center guys or the facility guys, and the other side isn't seeing the value. And so I think that has been probably one of the core things that has slowed down. What I have started seeing is seeing a little bit of a change within organizations where they're realizing this, and they're making actual changes to align those functions more, which I think is having a positive impact overall in the space.
I think that when you have these two camps that you have to sell to, so the IT camp and the facilities camp, they both have to get something. And I think what a lot of people have been worried, in our business area, on the cooling management side, people kind of have this idea that you're going to come in, turn things off or turn things down, and it's going to get too hot. You'll start bumping up against the ASHRAE limits, and the IT guys don't want their servers exposed to high temperature. And so everybody has to win. One thing that we've been able to show is when you got a smart enough system managing the cooling assets in your data center, sometimes you turn off cooling units that don't need to be on, it actually gets cooler. It doesn't get hotter. And that's because it's counterintuitive. We had a case, for example, a 10,000 square foot space in a bigger colo where our software shut off 9 out of 14 units, and the temperature went down 2 degrees.
What's the physics behind that?
Well, so what you have on the IT side, which is why people want to virtualize servers, they're all running at 25%. So you make a bunch of virtual servers, you move the applications onto the virtual servers, and you shut off the ones that now have no application load. On the cooling side, especially on the white floor, the kind of common thing that you see is that, first of all, mechanical engineers oversize everything. The thing that you hear in the industry among mechanical engineers
out there,
is no one ever got sued for oversizing, right? So everything's oversized anyways. Plus, in a data center, you have to have redundancy. So there's just way more stuff than you need. So what happens when they run at low utilization, sometimes the onboard controls that are in the unit simply stop cooling altogether. So all it's doing is taking warm air from up above in the room and blowing it, if it's a raised floor system, down into a plenum that's supposed to be cold. So you're blowing 75-degree air. It's actually going through a fan that's basically an 8-kilowatt heater and coming out at 77 degrees into a plenum that should be at like high 50s or something like that. And so when you shut it off, it's not a heater anymore. It's just not doing anything anymore. And the plenum temperatures become much more even. The flow rates kind of get evened out. The flow just kind of gently comes up, and the data center is colder.
Well, as an electrical engineer, I always had issues with mechanical engineers myself. But Mike, can you tell us a little bit, going back to how do you sell to both the facilities person and to the IT person? What's your experience been?
And I'm an aerospace engineer. Just
right. It's almost like mechanical. I don't know.
You can't over-design airplanes. I echo what Cliff said. It is hard to fundamentally answer your question. It has slowed down adoption in this industry.
it being the disparity between facilities folks and the IT folks. They're measured differently, they have different jobs, they have different budgets, and so trying to get them to agree on spend and what's good for everybody is a difficult task. On the other hand, we are seeing that they're coming together. We've talked to several companies lately that are starting to understand that we need to get them in the same room and get the boss in the room, and really the essence of it is sell a little bit higher, where the two come together. But also if you can get them in this room at the same time and talk about both aspects of the problem, energy reduction, IT efficiency, IT as a factory, optimizing the output of the factory for the least dollar cost, it all starts to make sense. So it's starting to move ahead.
So are you seeing either, which group is getting the upper hand from an organizational perspective? Because usually, you know, as we've seen these things play out, you know, there's a power struggle because now everybody says, well, the data center is really, if I control the data center, it's good for my career. So it's, especially if I can be seen as the hero. So who's winning out in this struggle?
I don't know if to say there's a winner, but what I will say,
Somebody's getting promoted.
What I will say is that you know, certainly over the last few years, some of the facilities guys' concerns have rubbed off on the IT guys, and so there is much more of a concern among the IT guys than I think there was in the past about energy. But I'm not sure if that defines a winner so much. So I guess it probably, you know, to the facilities guy by nose.
Okay.
I think that depends a lot on the kind of organization as well. You know, if it's a very IT-centric organization, I think the IT guy has more power. And, you know, a co-location facility is basically, it's the facility, and the IT stuff is, you know, largely under the domain of the co-location organization's customers, right? So it depends a lot, I think, on the organization and how it's configured and what its business mission is.
Exactly. The business mission, again, if uptime will rule.
Yeah, right.
So.
Are you seeing new positions being created with new titles? I mean, that somebody that's kind of half IT, half facilities, and we saw that with compliance. Chief compliance officers started getting, that was a position you never saw before. Are you starting to see new positions, new titles being created?
Well, there's always new titles being created. That's almost better than a promotion at times. You know, when again, I mean, we're biased. We're a wholesale provider, where it's a very typical outsourcing play, and data centers are extremely capital intensive. We believe that there's an economies of scale in terms of size where it makes sense to outsource a data center. That said, there's many, you know, megawatt to 2 megawatt data centers getting built by, you know, enterprise customers, and there's a variety of reasons that happens. Some are good, some are bad, but again, you know, it should be the value of the transactions that occur in the data center are really probably what should drive it. But if you separate that and assume that they're all equal, it's a very obvious cost of capital equation to look at the dollar per megawatt of critical load build and look at the underlying, you know, cost of equity or cost of capital of a prospective customer and make that decision. You know, some people in the wholesale space, they have a quip that you never lose a sale to CFO and you always lose a sale to the CIO. And, you know, there may be reasons for that, but
we've all seen that in every industry.
It's a challenging enterprise sale.
So one of the things, maybe we can switch gears a little bit, and I think the panel has talked a lot about adjacent technologies that are affecting what's happening at the data center. We've talked a little bit about virtualization. We haven't really talked about cloud computing or SaaS. I mean, there's, I think, a small debate on, does SaaS make a data center better or does SaaS not make a data center better? What's the panel's perspective on, you know, virtualization and cloud? How is that affecting? We talked a little bit about load sharing, but it'd be interesting to get your perspective. Michael?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, cloud is reality. cloud is not as mysterious as it sounds. And there's different types of cloud. There's the public cloud, there's the private cloud, and there's the hybrid cloud. And depending on security and what the type of drivers and what the type of application is, it varies into who is a good candidate for that type of application. I think in your previous question you brought up what are some of the drivers when we look at factors like HIPAA, SAT-70, things like that or SOX 404. Those are important things that drive the usage of the data center, and that might sway the decision whether a particular customer would build their own data center, looking at outsourcing, like in an area like us where we have private suites that have SCIF-related attributes to it, or outsource something to the cloud. And again, that has to do with the quality of service, the level of uptime, and what they're actually expecting to get out of it.
Jeff, do you have a perspective from startups that you're seeing?
So, yeah, I mean, I think the cloud, as you said, is really a reality, and I don't necessarily think that people are looking at the cloud. There's certain people in the data center that are looking at it, but I don't think that the data center is driving the movement in the cloud. I think that is more of a business side and more of a functionality side. But when it comes to the cloud, specifically on what it does, the impact it does allow people to not, you asked a question, I think, which was, does it make the data center better? And quickly I thought to myself, depends on whose data center you're talking about. So certainly, the cloud provider, they can operate, again, economies of scale and operate with, more efficient equipment. So I think there ultimately can be some efficiencies from the cloud in terms of being able to consolidate and drive with the highest level and most efficient equipment you can. And it's more in their interest to do that.
Okay, and now let's talk about how you're spending your time. I mean, clearly you're in this data center management space. So for a long time, I think we all saw that data centers were in our mind. With Cisco, Juniper, a lot of people made a lot of money in the 90s in data centers, and they kind of disappeared from our mindset, but now they're coming back as the cost of energy comes up. What is it that you personally are, what do you see as the opportunity for yourself? Why is it that you're interested in this space? I mean, from an entrepreneur, you have many opportunities. You've been all serial entrepreneurs, done many things. You can do other things. Why are you doing this in this data center space? Mike, can you start?
Well, first of all, if you just look at the demand for data, when I took a look at this, at first, to be blunt, I thought, it's kind of infrastructure and boring and all that.
Yes, because there's an acronym, DCIM, Data Center Infrastructure Management. So that's the other one you have to remember, DCIM, PUE.
Yeah. And so there's all these acronyms. So when I first looked at this, I thought, it just didn't zing about anything. And then I thought about it, and it didn't take long to realize that this whole society is about the demand for data in one form or another. Whether you're a business or a consumer, you're a teenager. We watch movies, on the fly. Everything's happening over the airwaves. And so the demand for data is incredibly high. And it very, very quickly became evident that the energy that it takes to generate that data is exponentially growing. Never mind the cost of it, but it's eating it up. It's also limiting a lot of other things we can do. So I looked at that as an opportunity to make a difference, frankly. That sounds corny, but there's an opportunity here to really reduce the amount of energy that it takes to generate the demand that we're putting on the data that has to be driven out of those data centers.
It's a big data opportunity. Cliff?
I started Vigilant because I saw an opportunity for a great convergence of technology, new technology, and a need for better energy management. The need is coming from all the things we all know about, concerns about global warming, geopolitics that have impacts on energy cost and reliability, and then just growing demand, from places like China and other places like that. That all those things make energy, in the long run, it just keeps getting more and more expensive, and it also keeps getting more and more volatile. And then you combine that with what I saw when I was at Berkeley as, maybe the third most important disruptive technology in the commercial and industrial automation business. So, there's really been, a couple of them before that were really big. The microprocessor in the 60s and 70s really changed commercial and industrial automation, obviously. And then, the internet and the World Wide Web changed it again in the 90s. And now what we have is wireless mesh networking that allows us to go into a 100,000 square foot data center and instrument it with hundreds of sensors in literally like 2 to 3 days. So this is something that, if you went to Honeywell and got a system from them and had them do it the conventional way, it would take them 9 months and cost millions. We can get in and install and get the information we need to have software start making good decisions just in a matter of days. So that, like, the convergence of the technology with the need seemed to me to be an obvious, fit for a good company.
Jeff, what do you see?
Yeah, so I had actually a similar thought process as Mike in terms of just looking at the trends and looking at what was happening. And from an investment standpoint, there's been incredible focus over the last several years on things out on the edge, on different ways to consume bandwidth, consume data. And there had actually been an exodus away from people that were looking to make investments and focus on actually supporting those networks and supporting those data centers. And certainly from a venture perspective, people are looking for very capital efficient investments and looking for those types of opportunities. And so, I think it was just one of trying to be a little contrarian and start focusing on areas where, where you see the puck going. And, and again, you've listed out very, very well, all of the, the issues, the rising cost of energy, space, all the things that are laid out there. Just, I think it's a very interesting space to invest in that, that I will qualify with, it was a Bill Gates quote that I heard the other day, which was, things happen much slower than you think, or people tend to overestimate what's going to happen over the next 2 years, but underestimate what's going to happen over the next 10. I think we're past the 2-year period in the space, but we're not quite to the 10 yet. So,
Michael?
There's 2 cores to our mission statement. The first is building a energy efficient data center that not only delivers a low total cost of ownership experience to our customers, but also recognizing that the less power that we use manifests itself almost geometrically on the production side. So for instance, in one of the reasons that we're located on an Air Force base in Sacramento is we're able to get 90 megawatts, which is 3% of Sacramento's gross power. The ratio of the critical load versus the amount of power that we need for cooling, and when you look at it from, whether it's hydro production or wind or whatever it is, the amount of power that we save in really any of the mechanisms that we use to build it more efficiently are huge. The second core is that we want to build data centers that make sense for where data centers are. We don't believe that they should be in urban environments. We believe that they should be in areas with limited risk of natural disaster, with low cost power, with great connectivity, and build them in a flat, modular sense that it's something that somebody would be happy with from a data center. And again, I think that also drives at the types of customers that we're going after. But it's really those 2 attributes that we found were, when we founded the company in 2007, were almost non-existent in the market. And our objective is to execute that not only in our existing geography, but also go to other markets.
Okay, one of the things I think is always interesting for when I talk to entrepreneurs, and I would guess from entrepreneurs in the audience, is to, it'd be interesting to hear from you how you got your first customer. That first customer has to take a leap of faith. You don't have anything. You're doing something very critical for them. How did that go? Is there any interesting stories about those first customers and how how you got them to cross the line. Mike, can you start us off?
Not an interesting story. It was actually just very difficult. And I can't just...
It's a kind of a lesson for all of us.
Yeah, no,
It's not, you're not alone.
And I've done this more than once, so the first customer is always the toughest, because there is the, really, where have you done this before? I haven't. Do you have any results from other customers? No. And you're trying very hard not to say, you're the first one. It is the most difficult thing an entrepreneur can do, I think, is to get that first sale. For us, it was just persuasion, hard work, trying to understand what the customers' demands were, what their measures were, why were they interested. We found an advocate. That's always helpful. Find someone in the company that understands and is willing to take a little bit of a risk. I always say look for the advocate that's an up and comer. I think you said promoted. Help them get promoted is the way I look at it. And this is just a little advice for other entrepreneurs, but it's always find the advocate. And in our case, we found someone who had just been brought on board into the corporation with the specific charter of putting together initiatives to save energy. And we actually surprised him with how much energy is consumed in a data center, and we went from there. And so it's not an interesting story, it's just hard work.
Cliff, what's your story?
Well, the one thing that we were able to do was use energy efficiency dollars, which there's a fair amount of in California, to give our first customers a really, really great deal. I mean, basically all of us who are ratepayers pay into a fund that gets distributed both for energy R&D and energy efficiency. And so we were able to tap into those resources to give the lead customers a great deal. Some of them got a system that was free. Others just got a really, really short payback. But we also, we found customers who were innovative and were interested in doing something outside the box. And we put a lot of effort into giving them a very thoughtful proposal that just didn't sound like the same thing that they had been hearing from everybody else. So I think those are the key things.
Jeff, what are your lessons learned for how do you help your angel investments get their first customer?
I think, first of all, when you're talking about build a product in that is something that drives value. And, in this space and what we've been talking about, in my mind, that means something that goes beyond just energy, something that actually has a broader appeal. So, the second thing, these are some obvious things here, but you've just got to be persistent, and you've got to make it easy for the customer. Deliver, make sure that you are keeping in touch, making sure that you are driving, giving them what they need, giving them what they need before they need it, and teeing them up for that first sale. Again, there's no substitute for hard work in this case, and I think just going in with the right attitude and showing that to that customer that you're going to be there to deliver that product and somebody they can rely upon is one of the keys in my mind.
Michael?
Well, I have to tell you, I'm pretty bubbling to give a vignette on our first customer, but we haven't quite announced that yet. But in terms of lessons learned, I think for us, the big one is you spend a lot of time and you put your heart and soul into delivering a vision of what you think is the ultimate customer experience. And unfortunately, that doesn't always mesh with what the customer wants.
Those pesky customers that just don't know how good we make our products.
That's correct. So I think for us, it's being flexible, it's being reactive, it's looking to, there's not particularly in the data center world, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to customers. And getting your first customer is important for a variety of different reasons, because it gives you the credentials to go on and do bigger things. And also is important from an investor's perspective as well. But keeping your eye and being reactive to what a customer wants, and being open to modifying your design to accommodate what their particular requests are.
Okay, with that, I'd like to open up the the panel to questions from the floor. Does anybody have any questions?
Hold on. Hold on.
Hold on. Mic coming.
Okay, hello. My name is Prabhat Andle, and I want to revisit a question that was raised about turning off servers at night and the power savings from that. One of the biggest objections is, how do you turn servers off at night? So let me give a little bit of my background. From 2006 to 2009, for almost 4 years, I was VP and business unit head at CA Technologies, or what was known as Computer Associates in India, responsible for infrastructure management products, NSM, which is network and systems management, Autosys, which is workload automation, and ACM, which was automated configuration management and device discovery on the network and network management. One of the products that was developed was to basically allow recognizing that a server was reaching its thresholds on storage or memory or on processor loading, and transferring jobs automatically to underutilized servers with similar configurations. And that is a very successful product for automated recovery. The corollary that we proposed, that nobody seemed to really like, at that time at least, was to say that if we can do that, we can also look at underutilized servers at night and move their jobs and applications to moderately utilized servers and actually turn them off. And that allows 10 to 30% of the servers in most ordinary organizations to be turned off. So my question is, how does the panel feel about being able to do something like that? And does it make sense to do it in that mode, where you can automatically move the jobs and applications from underutilized servers to moderately utilized servers and turn off those underutilized servers?
That's happening right now using VMware.
VMware is one solution, yes.
Go ahead.
I think, technically it's, I mean, the way you explain it, it's like, yeah, of course you ought to do that, right? Everybody ought to be able to do that. Everybody should be doing that today. But the problem is that, people who are running those applications on those servers are afraid to do that. And enough of them have enough veto power that they prevent that from happening a lot. Now, the fact that VMware is now doing it means that, you're going to see a lot more of that. But that's the business problem, is that people are afraid.
Okay, next question.
Hi, Anand Akela from HP. I have a comment and a question. I also chair a work group in GreenGrid, a consortium that does data center energy efficiency. So comment on PUE, one of the reasons that it is really used by a lot of organizations is its simplicity. The way, Mike, you explained, total power coming in divided by the power utilized by the IT. So that simplicity is used. But there are challenges, utilization and cost are some of the variables that we are trying to work into and kind of extend the metric, working with Uptime Institute and things like that. So that was my comment. Question is, what are those variables that you are seeing, to Michael's, your point, to your mission, that you need to relate these metrics to total cost of ownership? How can these metric, because right now it's more of a trend, like everyone is kind of collecting this information. It's easy to collect because you can measure that. But some of the metrics, the collection of the metrics and aggregation of that is a big challenge. So my question to the panel is, what are some of those things? Utilization is definitely one, but what are the other things that you see is kind of important from metric point of view, and that could be one, related to the total cost of ownership, as well as how easy it is to measure? Sorry, too many questions.
Quite a few.
Sure. Well, I think one of the reasons that PUE has become so preeminent and almost the holy grail in the industry is because there's a billing attribute that's associated with it. So for instance, in the wholesale segment of the market, you're charged a certain amount for data center space that has the ability to deliver a certain amount of power. You're charged for the critical load which you use, which is metered, And then there's some people call it cooling uplift, some people approximate PUE, and that's what you're charged, theoretically for cooling. Now, and I forgot who made the point, but it's very true. There's a number of ways to game the system. I mean, you can change the numerators, the denominators. You can say, well, you can go use my container, but just go connect it to somebody's chilled water, and so therefore I have a low PUE, but you're not accounting for the chilled water that's used to cool the container. Right? So, and the Green Grid has done a lot of fantastic work with trying to identify some of the ways that PUE has been, I guess adulterated is perhaps the right word. I'm not quite sure. I'm sorry, was that there a question?
What question was like, what are the other things that you see, that needs to be measured and to become part of the metric and to be related to, very easily the total cost of ownership and ultimately you're trying to deliver?
Well, I guess our philosophy, correctly or incorrectly, is that if the customer pays a monetary penalty for being less efficient, then we're driving the appropriate behavior. And those behaviors include virtualization, managing power effectively, all those types of things. I think everybody in the panel is a huge proponent for it. I think this is a great panel because everyone here is in the appropriate ecosystem with respect to that, and all drive into the ultimate attribute. But from our perspective, we want our customers to be our partners in lowering their total cost of ownership, and then also lowering the gross amount of energy used by the data center, which I think is what people try to approximate PUE for.
Mike, did you have a point of view on the PUE and other metrics around that? You discussed that before.
Well, I'm the naysayer on PUE, so I'll stay out of that one for a moment. But I'll go with the other thoughts on that. And by the way, you hit it. The only reason I'm a naysayer is because I see it gamed all the time. So you're not really sure what you're getting out of just that measure. So the notion for me is it's not just that. You can look at a lot of things that make up TCO. If you're talking about utilization of a server and you're going to virtualize, you're able to virtualize more on that server because you have that opportunity. You've got to start looking at, that's a good idea, but with what apps? Now what's the total cost of ownership of the apps and so on. Something we haven't talked a lot about is running a data center also includes labor. You mentioned earlier that cooling is a lot of labor, and a lot of people forget that cost. It's about, certainly we've been talking about technology, it's about technology, but it's also about people and processes. And so oftentimes we forget those measures when we start saying, oh, shut off the server, that's a good thing. Well, it probably is, intuitively it is. But what are you going to replace it with? I see, you move those applications to a virtualized machine. You paid a license cost for the virtualized machine, and you paid a license cost for the apps. The answer is probably intuitively correct, but you really have to think through all of those things. There's a lot more. One that we see all the time is excess redundancy. Okay, so I've got two loads. I need 10 watts total. 8 watts total to run it. I've got 5 here and 5 here. Over redundant. What's the cost of that?
I just add, I think, in terms of measurement, I think, measure all the variables you can, but I think at the same time being able to correlate those variables and make sure you're looking at the sort of the holistic big picture around everything is what you really want. Is what the real holy grail is to understand what's really going on, not just picking and looking at one variable right here, one variable right there, and hoping that you're picking something that's relevant, because it could actually have effects that you're not thinking about down the road.
Okay, maybe another question? Ann? Okay,
I have the mic.
first.
So go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay,
So,
Ann next.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mohinder Sika, and of course, energy management and cost is important if you are in the outsourcing operations excellence business, right, for anybody providing data centers, big data centers. But if I'm a big tech company, let's say $100 million, can you talk about the threshold at which cost of energy is important to me? So my question is, as a percentage of revenue, what is the data center cost, and what percentage of that is the energy going into the data center? And at what point is it relevant to me? So do I have to be a $200 million tech operation when I look at the energy management component of the data center cost?
Michael?
I didn't bring my Excel spreadsheet, unfortunately. But, if I did have it, what would be some of the things I would look at? First there's the capital cost, how that's amortized, and again, these data centers are $50, $100 million per building, so there's that attribute to it. There's looking at the ratio. When you look at the total cost of ownership, there's a ratio between the impact of lower utility cost, measured on $1 per kilowatt per hour average across the year basis, and the PUE, and it's actually 1-to-1. For every 1/10 of a point of PUE, it's approximately 1 cent per kilowatt hour, I think is about correct. But then, in terms of efficiency, you have to look at what the actual load is, if it's 100%, and all the ways that you would wrap that into what your total cost of ownership experience is. So to answer your question, in terms of building data centers, we're, this is a self-serving comment, but having done the numbers multiple times, we believe that there's a minimum order of magnitude that's around 35 to 40,000 square feet, so 4 to 6 megawatts of critical load. That allows you to get the level of energy efficiency and the economies of scale for building a data center. So, and again, the size of your market cap and the amount of employees you have are not necessarily correlated to the amount of data center space that you need. So it's hard to say, but those are some of the attributes that I think a holistic decision maker would look at.
Mike, did you have a perspective?
No, I think that got it. I was going to add something about number of assets that are in there. So we sometimes think of how many things are in a data center. So the square footage is one way of looking at it. A significant number of assets, 20,000 to 50,000 assets is consuming a lot of energy. So I can't answer your question from the standpoint of how much revenue or market cap should you have to where energy and consumption in data center matters. But if you just look at the data center, if you start to approach the 3 to 5 megawatts or the square footage that Michael cited, or 20 to 50,000 assets, you're consuming enough energy that it should matter to you.
And I just add, there's different technologies out there that are doing different things that can make it more efficient on any number of levels. So there are certain things that don't cost that much out of the gate, but can have big relative, certainly percentage impacts on the solution. So I think it's an individual ROI analysis on all right, let's take this technology, let's just assume that unless I have, 5 servers, that there's probably room for improvement. And that, the different technologies that you use will have different implementation costs, different management costs, different upfront costs. And I think you can match the type of technologies to the size of the data center to make sure that there's a positive ROI.
And I think Google, my understanding is that Google spends about 30% of a data center is in power. So when that not 30% of that of the cost of the data is big enough to be relevant to you, you'll kind of know.
My question is, Google is what, $20 billion business, right? So anybody less than $1 billion is the energy saving interesting for them.
I think what the panel's telling. Yeah, I think the panel's telling you that it's not correlated. The power in your data center, the power usage in your data center is not correlated to revenue necessarily. It's correlated to what's in the data center. That's,
I turn off the lights in my house, and that makes a difference, and that's relevant to me. So if you take that sort of analogy, I don't know if again.
So my question is from a business perspective.
Sure.
Or you guys are in this industry. So at what point is it layoff?
I was answer that by saying that if you have anything more than 5,000 servers, then it
That's a good one. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that number before.
Hey, Ann had a question?
I'm very glad to, I'm Ann Perlman from Moreland Partners, and I'm very glad to follow the last question. Mine is much simpler. American drivers cut down their driving at about $4 per gallon at the gasoline pump. Is there a magic number for your industry in terms of the cost of electricity that would change all of your businesses to the happiest day, that you're so glad, not for altruistic reasons that you're running these companies, but because it's such an obvious play? We have to have what all of you are advocating.
Energy costs, electric energy costs across the United States vary by about a factor of 4 from the cheapest to the most expensive. And in the most expensive places like Manhattan, California is high, but it's actually not the highest. It's about the 14th highest state. In those places, the ROI of an energy management or an energy saving system is really good. In places like Japan or Europe, the energy costs are about twice what they are in the U.S. in general, and more expensive than almost any place in the United States. And in those areas, there's a lot more emphasis on energy efficiency, energy management, doing better with energy. So I think you could just sort of like look at people's behaviors across the United States, how they make energy-related decisions and how much they pay, and look outside the United States as well. Of course, there are some cultural differences to get an idea of where it is, when does it really start getting so expensive that people make decisions that are energy-based.
Okay, one last question.
I don't know now.
Okay.
One disadvantage of sitting this side is that you never look at this side, what's happening. And Mukesh Khatter from Oracle. I also sit on the Green Grid Board of Directors. One point that I've missed from all of you in relation to PUE is that we have a constrained power supply. If you have a 10 megawatt coming, and if you have a PUE of 2.0, that means one goes to IT, one goes to your infrastructure, you can only run half a megawatt of the system, 5 megawatt of the system. But if you improve your PUE to 1.5, now you have 6.7 megawatt of the IT equipment, and that is what is your revenue generating performance. So anytime you can reduce the use of support equipment, the ancillary equipment, that frees up the power for you to do other things. And that's very important for your existing data centers, because we are finding no more power available, space is there.
So what is the question?
The question is, I haven't heard from you the relevance of the efficiency in increasing the capacity of the existing data centers. How would you see that happen?
So what's the effect of efficiency?
Well, maybe I misunderstood the question. I think we did touch on it. We didn't quite get directly at it. But certainly, there is the issue of there really is no more power at some point. And so we try to increase the efficiency of the data center. Centilla's view is that, remember I said, you can either reduce the energy or convert it to capacity. That's a simplistic statement because it's not all that straightforward. But you certainly can use the energy measure. You can use energy as a proxy for the efficiency of your data center and make capacity increasing decisions that take you from using from 2.0 to 1.5, and therefore what you've really done is change the denominator, the use of the ITs aspect. So if you can look at the energy down at the application level, for example, we found over and over again that the opportunity is less about reducing the energy associated with that, but showing the operator where to increase and get better leverage out of their virtualization, and thus increase the efficiency. So yeah, our view is you can reduce the energy, but it really is impacting the efficiency, and you can work both sides of the equation. Totally agree with you.
Okay, well, I think the panel will be here until at least 9 o'clock, I think. And so maybe everybody can ask individual questions. So I'd like to hear a round of applause for our illustrious panel. committee.
You can ask more questions after one. So first of all, I wanted to thank Armando organizing this wonderful and amazing panel, and especially the first energy program event we had with our two new highly accomplished co-chairs, Armando and of course Gopal Garg. And so let's give a big round of applause to them. Of course, we'll be holding a few more energy programs this year. I think Gopal's already working on a solar energy related, sometimes in later part of August and September. So all those energy enthusiasts, please keep on look out for it. And then I'm sure Armando will be back in. And by the way, he also flew in from Chicago, just like a couple of our people, at least 3 of them actually, 2 of them from San Francisco, 1 from Berkeley area. I don't know where Jeff came from. San Francisco. Okay, so these guys also came all the way from there. I really, really appreciate you all, being part of this panel today. Thank you again.